Hello, everybody. Welcome to our third Thursday on the fourth Thursday of October. It's great to be here. And if you've been doing these third Thursdays with us, you know that we're changing things up, switching things up now. And that's the first thing we want to talk about is what's the plan going forward with third Thursdays. Traditionally, in the past, they've been critiques on prompts that we would give the month earlier. Everybody would turn in art assignments, and then we would pick a handful and critique them and give a prize to one or two winners. Um, and we liked that. That was good, and it was good for we did that for about a year, didn't we?
Longer.
It seemed
Yeah,
like
year and a
longer
half.
than that, right? But we wanted to evolve, and we wanted to offer more value to the illustration community. And so going forward, what we're going to do are actual, I don't know a better term for it than webinars. We're going to pick a subject matter and present on them and give our input and our ideas and our thoughts on them. For example, next month, what I'm going to do is give a presentation. I'm calling it How to Get Your First 10,000 Followers on Social Media. And basically what it's going to be is a breakdown of best social media practices for illustrators and artists, people who are trying to gain a following, trying to get exposure for their work, trying to get work through social media. And I'm going to list the things that you need to be doing, the big no-nos, the things that you should never ever do. And I'm going to actually give full-on like tactics, strategies that I've done
He knows what he's
to gain
talking about
followers.
too. Yeah, I just found out today that Jake has what was it, 241,000 followers on Instagram.
Yeah.
Process
So
that for a second. 200. So now it makes sense when he posts a picture of like a burrito or something, and there's 8,000 likes. No, not kidding. Eight, like it's always into the thousands. Whatever he says, it's because
yeah,
241,000 followers. So he knows what
yeah.
he's talking about.
It's intense. Today I posted an Instagram story on compositions, how like my approach to compositions, and it's sort of like a in a nutshell version, a condensed version of our creative compositions class, where I just kind of took some of the highlights and shared them on Instagram. And and it was great because I asked for feedback. I said, if you guys like this kind of stuff, let me know. And I don't know, 200 people responded direct messages saying how much they appreciated that, which that kind of exposure and that kind of response that you can get from a community is, it's really something that you can't put a price tag on. You can't put a number on because it's so valuable. And so that's why I think every artist needs to be online, needs to be sharing their work online. And and um, I'm going to give one tip tonight, just to give you a taste of what I'm going to be talking about next month. But before we get into that, let's talk more about these webinars that we're going to do. Um, I think what the plan is we're going to um, every month it'll be either Lee, Will, or ours or mine turn to give a presentation. So I'll be next month. The following month will be either Lee or Will,
But we should all
and
still
then we'll
be
just
there. We'll all
what's
be
that?
we'll all be present at the
Yeah,
time.
we'll all be
One
present, but
person.
one person will be sort of in charge and giving, and basically have done their homework on on the thing and doing the presentation. But what I want to talk about is some of the ideas that I want to share in my future webinars, and you can share the ideas that you want to do. Um, and as we're talking, be thinking of things that you want us to teach and and share. I think the idea too, Will and Leah and I have talked about having guest artists come in. So oftentimes we have guest teachers that teach for SVS Learn, and we want to have these people join us for a third Thursday as well, and so we can get insight from leading industry professionals. So
So
I think that'd be
Brittany
great.
was saying that she says that seems like a regular class. It's not it's not a regular class. It's more just like a quick hit on a topic, and hopefully we can orient you guys to it and give you some good, tips and pointers to move forward within that topic. But it doesn't go in depth as a class does. 4 hours worth of class is not going to, we're not going to cover something in that much detail, and it's
Yeah.
not going to be so much technique based. We're not going to be critiquing your work. It's going to be topics in the field of illustration, if that makes sense.
Right. Right. These things will be available, for free on the webinar the night that we present them. And then after that, they're going to go into our archives, which will be available to all the subscribers to SVS. So
Right.
subscribers to SVS can be able to watch, review, watch any webinars that they miss. They'll be archived there for them to watch. So
And it's still you, it's still your community. You guys, the viewers, are kind of going to be able to sort of drive us on this, and that's kind of what we're looking for tonight. I mean, Jake and I are both going to, like he said, go over a couple of different ideas, but we're looking for your feedback and questions and issues that are coming up for you guys are perfect for you guys to be able to pitch it. And so before we get into what we're outlining, do you want to talk a little bit about why we're switching? Did we go over that in detail enough? Or if you guys are wondering why we decided to bail, because the critique format was working.
Yeah, go for it, Lee. Break that down for him.
The question is, where can I get it? Should I wear the octopus hat while we do this? Here.
If you have it handy, definitely.
Oh, I've always got it handy. So the reason that here, so much more credibility.
I wish I had a cool hat.
You guys have to keep this next to the computer because you never know when you're going to need it. No, I got to take this off. I can't answer the question. I feel like it's constricting me. The reason that we decided to change it, we liked we loved what you guys were doing for Third Thursday. We noticed that everybody was getting better and everybody's getting better quick, and that was a great thing. The problem is the audience seemed so limited to people who just did the assignment. So, 25 or 30 of you guys would do the assignment, and it was awesome, like I said, looking through that stuff. But we were talking about how do we appeal to a broader audience and address bigger issues, because the issues that we're tackling there, we're kind of covering in the classes, and we are going to start to do the live classes soon. So you're going to be able to get feedback that way. We're going to offer more portfolio reviews and more illustration reviews over the course of the next year. So that's going to be covered. And the problem with the Third Thursday we run into is really everybody wanted to be critiqued, but we couldn't do it. And each time we tried to solve that problem, it kind of opened up a new problem. Oh, you're not going into it long enough, or, and what we realized is everybody just wants, when you do work and you spend a lot of time on it, you want it to be seen. And everybody's like that. We're like that too, of course. And we just realized we can't hit enough of that. There's just not enough time. And we thought we could start, like I said, start to address some of the bigger issues in the field. We will do technique stuff with this too, but it's just a way to kind of broaden SVS. And we are going to be covering the critique side of stuff a little bit more in different formats too. So it's not entirely going away either. So it's more like we're not losing something, but we're just expanding.
Right. I think too also, and I don't know if you feel this way, because I don't think we talked specifically about this, but I felt like the things that at least I was critiquing were beginning to be repetitive.
Right.
By the end there, I felt like I had done the same critique 3 or 4 times every time I sat down. And so, they're recorded, they're there online for people to watch on YouTube, and I didn't feel like that was a good use of time to be repeating so much.
Yeah.
With this new format, with what we're going to be doing, everything should be fresh, everything should be new. We should be covering new topics, new things that really help artists outside of those specific things as well. So
Yeah.
that's one of my feelings about it.
Yeah, so that's why we decided to switch, and so now I guess we can get into what it's going to become. There was a question a minute ago on is it going to actually be on the third Thursday next month? It is, and I think that's going to be the first third Thursday where Jake, Will, and I are all together, because we're going to be at CTN. If anybody's going to be in the Los Angeles area, come see us at CTN. We'll be hanging out. We're going to do our third Thursday there, so that'll be a good one.
Also at CTN, we'll be doing portfolio reviews and critiques. So if you have work that you want to show us, we'd be happy to look at it, see what we can do to help you out, look at your portfolios.
Yeah.
So if you're going to be there, please stop by. They're switching up CTN. I don't know if you've been there before, but they're doing something a little different this time. They're giving the public access. I think it's $20 for a day pass, which they haven't done in the past. It's always been, the full. You have to pay the full amount to attend. But if you want to pay $20, you get just access to the outside tent where all of the artists and all of the studios are going to be present. You don't get to go into the building to do the live presentations and the workshops and things like that, but you do get to meet the artists out in the tent. So that's where we'll be at, and it's a great way to, $20 is such a
Yeah, it's so cheap. Eric was asking what day should he buy for that. We'll be there all 3 days. It's 3 days, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, we'll be there all 3 days.
The slowest day is Sunday. So if you want to take that.
I think we're doing some formal. I think Will, Jake, and I are doing some formal portfolio reviews, if I'm not mistaken. And then I think Jake's doing some kind of presentation, aren't you?
Yeah, I'm doing a presentation. I'm calling it, what did I decide to name it? The 5 pillars of creativity, I think is what I'm calling it. And my presentation is basically, and this might be a webinar I might do in the future too, but it's basically, I've worked with so many different creative professionals over my career of 17 or 18 years now. And what I've started to realize is there's these parallels between highly creative people, things that I see repeating between these people. And what I've narrowed it down to are there 5 pillars that every highly creative person does. And it's through these 5 things that I think fosters more creativity, not only in their own careers and in the work that they're doing, but in the illustration and the art community in general as well. So if you want to level up, if you feel like you've plateaued or you're directionless, these 5 pillars, if you adhere to them, I think what you'll do is you'll start to see gains in your own work almost immediately, and then definitely over a set period of time as you practice them. So we'll be talking about that.
That's awesome. That was actually one of my webinar topics, is how to accelerate your learning and skill. So we could probably tie that in, or that would be a great one, I think.
Cool.
All right, what's your 3 topics that you came up with?
So my 3 topics, the one I'm going to do next month is how to get your first 10,000 not subscribers, but followers. And then I want to follow that up with 5 things you can do to kill your career. So these are the big no-nos, the big don'ts. A lot of times we talk about these do's, these things you have to do, and I want to talk about the things you shouldn't do, and help you recognize that you're doing them. One of them in particular is scarcity mindset, and that is a mindset you just need to eradicate. And scarcity mindset is basically that if someone else gets a thing, then you don't have access to that thing. If there's 20 bananas in the jungle, then only 20 monkeys get those bananas. And if you're the 21st monkey, you're not going to get that banana. So you're going to fight, or if you find the bananas, you're going to hide them, okay? And that happens, I think that happens in with artists, where they think, oh, here's a resource. Here is a thing that's going to give me a competitive advantage. And if I hide this and if I keep it from other people, then I'm going to get better than them, right? And I don't think it works like that at all. I think the more you share and the more that you eliminate that mindset, the better it is, not only just for you, but for the community as a whole.
Yeah,
so that's one of the 5 things.
That's a great topic, Jake. I mean, and I think every artist comes to that point, to that realization at some point, and it's such a weight off your shoulders, because you're not trying to hold something real tight and make it your secret, and so nobody else can get it. If you look at the great teachers that are out there, Will and Jake being 2 of them for sure, or somebody like Feng Zhu, if you guys are familiar with him from the concept art community, he's done 2,000 videos on how to draw anything and everything, and how many people draw like Feng Zhu? Not
Hmm.
many people, right? And
Right.
so it's once as a teacher, we all come to that point at some it's that realization at some point that no matter, I can show you step by step how to paint something exactly, and you'll take your own thing away from it. And you're not going to be me.
Right.
You're not going to be
And
Jake.
that's why I'm so open with here's the pen I use, here's the tools that I use.
Yeah,
You're gonna use that pen differently than me, but even if you use it the same way as me, you use the same line, we're still gonna come up with different ideas and we're gonna draw the different things. So
I can't wait to see
um,
that one. That's going to be a good one.
yeah.
So
So
what's your
that was it. So number one was the 10,000 followers. Number two was the 5 things you can do to kill your career. And then number three, I thought it'd be cool to do an entire session on um, artist tools. Like here are the things that I love to use, and here's how I use them. Actual physical tools. Here's my favorite pens. Here's my favorite whiteout.
that would be fun. That would be a
Yeah,
blast. Because I always like to know not just what people are using, but why did they come to that specific thing. And like when I'm demoing a lot of that stuff, I'll show you why I'm using one pen, and I'll show you the alternate kind of pens to say, okay, look at the line quality and stuff like
yeah,
that. So cool to see that.
yeah.
Um, those are three good ones. Those are really good ones. Hope mine are that good. Mine are on making smoothies. No, I'm just kidding. I don't know. My first one, and something that I'm really interested in, is productivity. And so mine are kind of loosely associated with art. Mine kind of deal with the lifestyle of being an artist, and if that makes sense.
Hmm.
Um,
Hmm.
I listen to a lot of people, and I read a lot of information on how people become productive. How are people super achievers? If you guys notice, if you follow me and Jake and Will, all three of us are would probably be into that category. We make a lot of stuff. I mean, we're making all these classes, and we're teaching, and then all of a sudden there's I have 4 books coming out next year, and Jake's doing a book tour, and we get a lot of stuff done. And just like Jake said before, in terms of skill building, there's a common denominator there. What I've noticed that people are really effective at getting a lot of stuff done. There's a lot of common denominators there, and some people who do these same things over and over deliver, and they deliver, and they deliver, and they deliver. And then it's the other artists that can't seem to ever turn in a project on time, and they just run into these stumbling blocks. And so I think productivity is just a huge one to go over, not just with art, but how to live your life so you're not always behind the 8 ball on getting something done, and frantic, and having kind of a chaotic mind. So that's
Hmm.
my first one. The
Great.
second one is something I'm really interested in, and always have been ever since I graduated from college, and that's that transitional phase from being a student to being a professional. I talk about that. Those 3 years are so critical in setting up the rest of your life. So the top 5 things I wish I knew starting out, and that's
Hmm.
going to deal with that, basically that transition from being a student to being a professional. And some of the things are real small that can actually click you on the right track, or push you off the right track, and cost you a lot of money, cost you a lot of time, and a lot of energy too. So
That's gonna
top
be a good one.
Yeah, I think definitely something that I am interested in. Top 5 things
Right.
I wish I knew starting out. And then the last one was how to accelerate your learning and skill. So kind of goes along with the pillars that you're talking about and all that.
That's great. Um, you made me think of another one, and that would be to do an entire session on uh, alternatives to art school. Like, not everybody can afford art school or can take time off to do art school.
Yeah.
It might be later in life or whatever. And I would say, if you had $10,000 to put towards education, what would you spend it on? And I've been giving this advice to certain people, and I'd spend $5,000 here, I'd spend $2,000 here, and through that, getting just, I don't know if it'd be just as good, but definitely a solid education where you could have a portfolio coming out on the end of that if you're a self-motivated, productive person.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. That would be interesting to give you a hypothetical 10,000, me a hypothetical 10 grand, and Will,
Mhm.
and then for us not to compare before the webinar and see how they overlap.
Bless you, whoever that was. I've got to mute some people here. That's
When
hilarious.
they come in late, they're
That's
unmuted for some
probably me.
reason. Oh,
All
59
right.
is not old. Somebody said they're 59, they have no time for school. That is, you got plenty of time.
Yeah. My mom in her late 60s took a painting class. So,
There was a painter that was a contemporary of Picasso. Was his name Rousseau? That was discovered in his like late 60s, early 70s. I mean, he just started painting at that point, and he got super. He's in the history books.
mhm.
I think his name's Rousseau. I can't remember.
I was reading about David Roberts, who was a 19th century landscape painter. And he was self-taught and really didn't receive a full education until he was about 40 years old. And from 40 to he died at 65, he did numerous trips to the Holy Land, to the Middle East, to Egypt, to Nubia, and he came up with these beautiful prints, this print series of these Egyptian artifacts, and really saw these the countryside, the Middle East and the desert and things before they were really destroyed or changed by modern life, and he brought them back, and he was somewhat renowned before that, but after that he became world renowned for all this work that he'd done, and this was all in plus after 40.
Yeah,
So that gives me hope, you
yeah.
know.
You never know. You never know.
Yeah.
There's a couple of ideas that are flowing on the chat line right here. Two of them I grabbed just while they were flying by. You guys are.
Yeah.
One of them was how about a topic and how to transition from a day job to a freelance career. That's a fantastic suggestion. I didn't get who said that. And I can't. It's tough to scroll.
Are you copying these down?
Yeah, when I see them. Here's a class on inspiration would be nice. Examples of what you can learn from past
Hmm.
masters. There is a class, there's a lecture that I gave the local college here that was, I showed a current illustrator and I asked the class, it's a really hot illustrator, really, really in demand illustrator right now. And everybody's oohing and ahhing. They love her work. And I was like, she's really original, right? And they're like, yeah. And I was like, well, let me show you her teacher. And I showed them her teacher and they're like, oh wait, it looks almost the same. And I was like, well, let me show you that person's teacher. And we went back
Mm,
almost 100 years and we could trace exactly why it looked the way that it did. And I
that's
think it's a
great.
good lecture. And basically what it said to the students is you don't have to reinvent the wheel. You can, stand on other people's shoulders is what I always say. Use the good
Yeah.
and then add yourself
Yeah.
to it and you're on your way. Um, so that's it. That'd be a good, interesting one, I think. Somebody else said maintaining creative focus. That goes along with productivity, in my opinion. Definitely something that we
Uh-huh.
need to address because it's a
I
tough one,
think so.
especially for our group. It's hard when we can get
Yeah.
distracted so quick, and with all the social media on, the online stuff and the emails and the messages and all that, it's hard to get stuff done. So definitely.
Someone just suggested the legal side of being an illustrator.
Oh, you guys are
Uh,
talking my language now. I love that stuff. I, I could talk about that stuff all day. I don't know why it makes me so happy, but I think it makes me
all right.
feel
That
secure in knowing those laws and how it works and precedent and all that stuff. So I love that stuff.
yeah. So like licensing, trademarks, things like that.
Yeah, and when it gets violated, what
Hmm.
happens? And so, I mean, a lot of people think some things, and then the reality is it's not true. I'll give you guys an example of that right now. I always say in my business class to always have a contract, of course, before you start work, even if you're doing work for your grandma, get a contract, right? The other
Hmm.
side of that, if you start to dig a little bit deeper, is that contracts are an agreed upon thing, but they don't mean much unless you're a millionaire. Because if a company doesn't want to pay you, guess what? There's no way you're going to collect it. Even with an ironclad contract that says everything spelled out and they're totally in the wrong, it takes 10 years to claim that money, even when it's an obvious violation. So you got to be smart. That goes into the business side of stuff, is how do you collect money? People who wait till the end of a job to collect everything are in very dangerous waters because of that. Contracts are only good if both sides fulfill them. Now, you should still have a contract. Don't say, well, they don't mean anything, because they do. There's an implied and a written agreement there, but enforcing them legally is very tough. And so I like to go into what happens when somebody says, yeah, I'm not going to pay you even when we got a contract. So there's a bunch of that stuff that we could go into.
There's been a few more here. One I thought was really good, a class on, or a webinar on networking. How do you network as a illustrator, as an artist, which I think is huge and has been, I think, a key part to my success as well. Every good job that I've gotten has been through some form of networking, whether it's personal relationships, or somebody who knew somebody that knew me, or somebody who saw my work online and came to know me through how active I was on social media. So there's different levels of networking there. I think that'd be a great one.
Somebody suggested earlier in the day, not in the chat, but earlier in the day to me when I was mentioning what we were talking about tonight, going into art fairs and doing Comic-Cons and things like that, and what the pros and the cons are. How do you get into that? I'd like to do a whole class on that, a whole video class on that, because it gets pretty deep once you start really investigating how they work. But because Will and Jake have done so many cons and I've done so many fairs, we could cover a pretty good amount of territory there.
Oh yeah, it could be like selling at a convention boot camp.
Yeah.
And Will's been posting good stuff on his YouTube channel, but I think a class where it just like narrows it down and just sort of shotgun the information to your gut, and then have some sort of PDF download that like explains point by point. Here's what you do. Here's what you do. Here's what you never do.
How long?
Because there's so many parts
the webinars are going to be?
The webinars?
Yeah.
I was just thinking that would be a great class, but I think our webinars, I see the format being an hour, 45 minutes of instruction and us sort of bouncing back and forth, and then a 15-minute Q&A, and then calling it good.
And you guys will get to watch us argue too, because invariably we're going to all have different opinions on this stuff.
Yeah.
Which is fun. So
another one I saw on there was how to teach. And I think that's one of the best things you can do to be a better artist, is teach someone else something. So yeah, I like that idea too. All right, I think that's good for that. Let me just look at my outline here. If we had Will here, we could hear his 3 ideas, but Will couldn't make it tonight.
He'll announce his at our next month's, I guess.
Yeah, I'll have a little moment of silence for him. No.
He's traveling right now.
So I want to do, just for 10 minutes, 10-15 minutes, a Q&A session right now. Ask me and Lee any question that you want answered in regards to illustration, the business side of it, networking, self-promotion, whatever you guys have a question about. Let's just take a few questions and just so you guys get a feel of what our Q&A is going to be like moving forward in these webinars.
And you if you have a question, keep suggesting some of this stuff too. Kind of whatever comes to your mind. First of all, what do you guys think about this idea and this format and all that? Does it seem like a good place to go from where we were in Third Thursday? I hope you guys are on board.
They like it.
Fairly positive.
Look at all those likes and loves.
Yes. Nothing like being loved. Good. I think I'm excited about it, and Jake's excited about it, and Will's excited about it, so I can't imagine it being a bad move if all 3 of us think it's going to be a good idea.
There is a few people who it's their first time here tonight, so
Mark, I'll answer this first one. I just lost his name. Mark, I didn't catch his last name. Asking if there's a standard blank contract form that I could share with you guys. I don't have a blank one, but let me give you a resource. Hold on one second. Okay. Okay, so I'm going to share my screen real quick. Show my screen. Can you see my screen, Jake?
Yes.
Okay, so the Graphic Artist Guild Handbook, this one, the Pricing and Ethical Guidelines book. I mentioned this in my business class quite a few times. It is a fantastic book. It has a ton of boilerplate contracts, not just contracts to give your clients, but also estimates, model releases, all kinds of stuff, stock releases. If you're licensing an image, it has a lot of that stuff, and it's all downloadable at this point, so you don't even have to go buy the book anymore. Of course, you can just get it online, and you can download. I think they have 2 different versions of it now, but it has everything, and it has how to estimate jobs, and sometimes depending on where you are, the estimates might look a little high, or depending on whether you're a beginner or you're a seasoned pro. On how those numbers look, but at least it's a starting point. And the good thing about the Graphic Artist Guild's pricing guide is it gives you a starting point when your client doesn't know where you came up with a price. So if you're saying, hey, I want to do a billboard illustration and I want to do it for 10 grand, they're going to say 10 grand, where'd you get that? And then you open up the book, and it just kind of becomes at least a starting point. Again, it's not locked in, and you can work around it, again, depending on where you are in your career. But everyone needs to get this book. If you don't have it, maybe go into somebody and share the PDF if you don't want to pay the full price. Probably shouldn't have said that. But it's a good book, and if you don't have it, you're definitely going to be out some. It goes into a lot of legal aspects of how to deal with changes. If you get a client and you're doing a $300, like little icon or something, and what if your client comes back and wants 15 rounds of changes? Do you do the 16th change, and how do you handle that? So they tackle some of those weird issues that exist within our industry. So that's where you'll get your boilerplate contract and a whole bunch of other information as well.
Great. Someone asked a question. Here it is. Do you think digital art is dying in the children's book market? And so my answer to that is no, it's not dying. I think it's thriving. Beagle won the Caldecott 2 years ago, and that's a completely digital book. John Klassen has won Caldecotts and Caldecott honors, and all of his work is digital. He scans textures in and then builds his images digitally. I think you can look at 10 out of 11 children's books, and there's some aspect of digital going on there. A lot of them will use textures. They may do partially traditional, but everything goes through some digital form of phase to it. And I think if you want to be a children's book illustrator now, you've got to master Photoshop or some sort of digital program, because it just makes things so much easier and faster. And I think you can make stuff look a little nicer if you're able to touch things up, mess with color a little bit, alter colors. So yeah. What do you think, Lee?
Sorry, I was copying some stuff in, and I for some reason lost my screen too. What was the gist of that question?
It was just, do you think digital is dying in the children's book market?
Do I think digital is dying?
Yeah.
No, not at all.
Right.
Oh, no way. I think people are finally figuring out how to use it. I think half the stuff that you guys think might be traditional isn't. Mm-hmm. I do a bunch of books now where half the illustrations are digital and half the illustrations are traditional. My client has no idea which one is which. So yeah, I mean, I think people are just finally figuring out how to do things that don't look like, oh wow, that was made in Photoshop. And you'll see me and Jake and Will talk about that quite a bit in critiquing Photoshop paintings. Is like, don't use that airbrush too much, that soft edge brush, or all these little glowing effects. Give it a very distinctly digital look. And a lot of times, especially within children's book, that is not favored right now. But in entertainment, sometimes it is. And you'll definitely use that more in game art than you will children's books. So it just depends on the genre.
So have you been copying these questions down?
A couple. That's what I was trying to grab. There's one I saw just a second ago.
I saw one specifically to me, so I'll just handle that one while you're doing that. Jake,
Okay.
how did you find your publisher for Littlebot and Sparrow? How do authors contact you to illustrate books? Simple answer is I have a literary agent, and she works for me and goes out and is having lunch and dinner and meetings with editors and other agents in the industry and art directors, and she just is highly connected in that world. And so when something comes up, she knows, she'll hear some bit of gossip that this publisher is looking for this kind of book, and she'll have a client that will fit that particular thing, so she'll contact them and say, I've got a book for this. And so with Littlebot and Sparrow, she actually took it to 6 different publishers until we got someone who said, yeah, they'd be interested in doing it, and they gave us an offer, not an author. And so that's how I got that job. Authors never contact me for work. Usually what happens is an editor will contact my agent and say, we're thinking of using Jake to illustrate this book. Is he available? Here's a manuscript. Have him read it. And so what I'll do is I'll get manuscripts. I'll say yes or no. I just passed on a manuscript the other day for a book about it was a biography of an author, of a fantasy author. So stuff like that, and every once in a while I'll read one that I really like and I have to do, and it's with an author that I like, and the pay is going to be good, and so that's really how it works. So the question is how do you get an agent? How do you get representation? And I can't tell you how you can do it. I can tell you how I did it, and the way I did it was I put work out into the world, self-published it, got my work finished, actual finished stories, finished comics is what I was doing, short stories, and I put them out there, and eventually they made their way to my agent, and she saw them and she read them, and she was representing a couple other comic artists who knew me, so again, networking. And she said, what about this Jake Parker guy? Would he be somebody good to work with? And they said, yes, definitely, you got to call him. So she contacted me, and eventually we started working together. Between the first time that she contacted me and when she first negotiated a contract was 4 years. I wasn't ready to work with her yet. I was in a position where I was ready to take on a lot of work on the side because I had a day job. But then she, something came along and I was ready for that. So my advice to you in getting an agent is to, number one, get to a point where you're making professional level work, because if you want professional work, you have to be operating on that level. So if you're not there yet, then what you have to do is really focus on just getting better and improving and getting your work up to that level. So once it's at that level, start making things and putting them out there. And with the internet, you can actually put things out there. If you published your own children's book, you can't get anybody to give you any attention, go ahead and publish your own children's book, get it out there, get it noticed. You can also, and then, someone might contact you, something like that, but you can also send these things that you've made, these finished things, to, go to LinkedIn and just type in literary agent or literary agency and get all the contact info and just send it to 100 different people and see who contacts you back. And everybody that says no, ask them, why did you say no? And figure out.
At SCBWI, there's a lot of resources for that kind of stuff too. There's been a couple of kind of general SCBWI questions. Go to the SCBWI meetings and seminars and all that stuff. They talk about agents a lot.
Yeah,
Uh,
Yeah, and that's another resource. SCBWI is huge for networking because you'll meet people who then get jobs and then are working in the industry, and they know you and they've seen you at several of the meetings, and they'll recommend you to their agent or to their editor or to their art director. So it's a mix between doing awesome work, networking, and and um, and just being very proactive about getting your stuff out
And,
there.
and
All right.
there's one little thing I want to add to that. I think Jake's totally right about all of it. The problem is, how do you know when your work's good or not? I mean, the criteria is make sure your work's professional level, but how do you know? And I've got a couple of criteria that I always give people when they have that question for me, and I'll go through those real quick if you guys want. The first thing is your teacher or your instructors will start to notice. That'll be the first sign that you're doing really good. You'll get very, very enthusiastic responses from the instructor. The changes won't be as drastic when you turn in work. They won't be doing massive redraws. So that's the first thing. Second thing is you start getting a lot of attention, whether it's online or whether it's in the classroom. What I always paid attention to when I was in school and I was at Art Center is what happens when everybody puts the work up on the board. You know, we all line them up next to each other. Where do people gather? If people aren't standing in front of my work, there's something wrong. Because that's the perfect time. If they're not forced to stand in front of somebody's work, or they're not forced to say, "Oh, you did a great piece," or "You didn't." You know how that's kind of false sometimes when people are forced to give critiques. If you pay attention to where they go, you'll know how you're doing. And so my whole goal was to be in that top 3 of where people gather around the image and start talking about it before class. Same thing online. You'll start to get people redirecting things back to you. They'll start sharing your image without you having to ask and without you having to do stuff. You'll start to just feel that attention hitting your work. And if you're not getting it, it doesn't mean you're terrible. It just means you got to adjust some things, and you might not be ready for an agent yet if you're not starting to get that kind of feedback. The next thing is people recommend you to other people. It means like they see your work and they say, "Hey, my friend's got this gallery opening. Maybe you can do that." That means they actually like your work and they're going to stand behind it. So you'll start to see that happening quite a bit. And it's been interesting to see so many students have come through both SVS and the 10 years I was at the Art Institute of Portland. And this just happened all the time. It would be like a snowball slowly starting to roll, and they'd get, "Oh, somebody wants to interview you." You start getting these little things, and it just lets you know, hey, you're ready to go ahead and go for it and submit to an agent. The next one is people start bringing you in for interviews. They'll call you, recruiters will call you depending on the field that you're in, or agents will contact you. They want to know more about you. You won't even have to do the work. That's the ideal situation where they just come to you and say, "Hey, do you want to work with us?" And that's a great thing. And lastly, people start to hire you. When people put money behind it, that means there's no BS about it. That means they think you're good, and they think you're going to, do something good for their company, or going to do something good for their product or their brand. So using all of those criteria, you can kind of see where you are. And if you're not getting all that, you may want to either change it up a little bit. Maybe your portfolio needs editing or something like that. And so you definitely don't want to send out too early. So look for some of those signs.
Christina just asked, would SVS ever offer a review to see if we are close to being at a professional level? And that's our plan, is to offer portfolio reviews.
That's the first live class I'm doing in January. It deals with that exact thing, is extensive interviewing of you and the market and how you fit in the market and how your portfolio reflects who you are within that market. And that's going to start in January. You guys will see the little class card on SVS pretty soon for that class. And that's one of the first live ones we're doing because there's so much demand for that. And so many people don't know what to do and where they are. And it's not just for pros, by the way. It's for novices looking to get to the little bit better level. It's for the entry level pro. Probably not for the very beginner kind of student, but so we are offering that.
Yes, and there'll be emails going out for when you can sign up for that. Hey, Tanny asks, you're both busy people as artists, and both of you have families. How do you find balance between the two?
Ooh, that's a great question. Being very, very organized, and again, going back to the productivity tips that I want to go over in the webinar, but I'll give you just the brief answer to that is I had to work out a schedule that allowed me to do all things. You can't say yes to everything. Anything you say yes to means you say no to everything else. Hopefully that makes sense. And so if you're taking on too many commitments, all of a sudden everything suffers. Your family suffers, your work suffers, your exercise routine is going to suffer. So you just got to figure out what's important to you, and you have to say no to all the rest of it. And man, that is really difficult. I always advise people when I start talking about productivity to protect your calendar, guard it like it's something sacred. Because the second you start getting at all these little things, oh, go meet for drinks and go do this after work, and will you drop this thing off, and all that stuff's just going to get in the way. So you got to establish what your priorities are, and then you have to stick to it. And that's one of the hard things to do as well. I wake up at 4:45 every day. I'm in the studio by 5:15, and I'm basically almost got all my illustration done by around noon. I pick up my kid at 2 and hang out with him because that's a big priority. And so I hang out with him till about 5, and then I might come back in the studio for another hour or two. But the majority of my work, I know I'm a morning person, and it all takes place in that really high intensity kind of focused 6 or 7 hours.
Mm-hmm. I also take one day a week. It's Sunday, and I do not do any work. I don't go in my office that week. Sunday is a family day. That's day for me to just catch up, reconnect, and not have that day be about anything other than family and what we're doing as a family. And that's been really good for me, because not only does my family need it from me, but I need it from them. You can't believe how excited I am to go back into the studio on Monday, because I've had that day of like refreshment where I'm just like, new ideas are coming. Things that I've been able to like mull over, that I've been dealing with, the rest of the week I'm able to tackle and come at it with new perspectives. So taking one day a week, maybe 2 days, maybe you figure out your life balance, your work-life balance. Maybe you just take a full weekend, and it makes you more productive the rest of the 5 days. I typically reserve Saturday for like errands and chores and things like that. Sunday is just completely like chill, and then the rest of the week I'm working hard, and then make sure too that I set specific hours, kind of like what Lee is, that I'm in the studio by a certain time, that I'm out by a certain time, and I usually will escape down there at night a little bit too, just to fill in some gaps. But that's the balance issue there. How many more questions do we want to do? There's a lot of them here, but
coming up, they're so good. They're so good. I can give you guys one more tip along the lines of that last little bit on how to balance things out. And it's just something that I've kind of learned recently. But it's so good. I think it's just such a good little grain of information. People plan typically for an ideal situation. And what happens is the ideal situation doesn't happen. Things take longer. So say, for example, if I'm going to do a book, I plan, say I'm going to do 3 illustrations this week for my book. And, I'm thinking ideally that's what would happen. But what happens is another client calls and has a revision for another job. All of a sudden, those 3 illustrations are now late. And then everything dominoes down the way. And then I start working late because I got to finish these jobs. So I'm not spending time with my family. And so the advice that I was given, and which I just love this, is cut the workload, not from a plan realistically, cut the workload and leave open times for all the mess to catch up, where you don't keep dominoing all the way down the row. And that has just been such good advice, because I keep thinking to myself, well, man, I'll easily be able to do this schedule. And invariably, I can still barely get it done because something always fills up the time. But at least I'm not late on stuff now. So that's been a kind of a game changer. It's just leave blocks of extra time all over the place. Give yourself bigger buffer zones than you think you need.
Should we do one more question?
Some quick hit ones. Does SVS have a human anatomy class? Not yet. Are you doing one, Jake, on human anatomy?
I thought about doing it.
Well, you did the animal one. That's why I was wondering if that was going to be a set.
Yeah. Human anatomy was on my. It's coming.
So yes, at some point we are going to focus on a whole set of kind of basic skills. That's one thing that we had talked about before, and we'll be kind of meeting and figuring out what that track looks like. We are going to try to develop some tracks for SVS, so it's a little bit more clear on how to go through it, where to start, where to spend the middle time, and then where to end up. So I hope that that's going to become more clear over the next year too. Let's see. I'm looking through some of the questions now. There's a quick hit Instagram question. Jake, this is for you. Do you think Instagram's change in its policy using a logarithm makes it more difficult to get a significant amount of followers? In parentheses, I've just started to post on Instagram. So do you think it's harder now to get followers on Instagram than it was previously?
I think you are at an advantage if you have really good content and you post 3 times to 5 times to 7 times a week. The algorithm, what it does is it elevates posts that people like. It elevates posts that your followers like. So if your followers like your post and they double tap it and they give you that heart and they comment on it, they're more likely to see your work in their feed in the future, because what it says is, oh, this person likes what you're doing. I'm going to pop it up high in their feed so they can see it, when they turn on their phone the next time. So if you're creating work that gets that kind of engagement, then you're going to show up in people's feeds more, and what it is it's going to be a good thing for you. If you're posting work that isn't getting a response from people, then it's going to be worse for you, whereas you had a better chance before. So the moral of the story is be good. Put out your best stuff, and if having a large Instagram following is something that you really care about and you think it's something that you need to focus on, then you're going to have to treat Instagram like a job and carve out an hour every day to be like, okay, here's where I work on my drawing for Instagram, here's where I craft the right post, here's where I study hashtags, and here's where I do my post, and here's where I go and I comment on other people's posts and I become a member of this community, and then you watch that follower count rise, and you just got another sneak peek of next month's webinar.
That's perfect. Let me add one thing there, just because it comes up in classes a lot with students, and that's be careful of your online presence. I can't say it enough. I mean, you obviously see it happening in the news with politicians all the time. Be careful what you're posting out there, because you might not be in the market to be applying for jobs right now, but in 2 years you do not want all those drinking photos to come back to haunt you, or those whatever comments you're making. Just be careful of your online persona and post as if the world's going to see it. Post as if it's going to be on the front page, or a recruiter's going to see it. Because you just have to be careful, and a lot of students don't take that seriously until they make the switch to being a pro, and you just got to be careful with that.
Yep.
So good way to transition the social media stuff. Do you want to do your tip, Jake, on social media?
Yes. So that feeds into my one tip. That's right. I teased it and I never did it. So my one tip is to be a member of the community, whatever it is. If you're on Facebook, if you're on Twitter, if you're on Instagram, to actually be a member of it. Don't just go post your stuff and then leave. Being a member means that an active member means that you're commenting on other people's posts, you are following other people, you're liking other people's posts, you are replying to other people's comments in the comments. When people comment on your stuff, you're giving them a response. Your first 100 followers is like the sweetest time. First 100 to 1,000 is the sweetest time, because you're able to actually build solid connections with these people and you get to know them by name. After that, it gets harder and harder to keep track of who your followers are. But up until that point, you can be like, hey, I saw you posted this other thing. I really like that. Thanks for commenting on mine. And what that does is it's this organic growth that starts to happen, and you get to be known as, oh, this is a person, member of the community. They might be talking to someone else. You should follow her. She's really, she's really engaging, and that's what I do. So, set a goal for yourself. I'm gonna like 100 posts this week. I'm going to comment on 50 posts this week. And I'm going to follow 10 new people this week and give them all a comment and a shout out or something like that.
Very good. I can use that advice right now. That's good.
All right. Should we call it quits?
I think we'll call it a night. Thank you guys for the suggestions. Those were really good. I got a whole page of notes now from what we were just talking about. Feel free to post it on the forum if you guys are using the forum actively. Post different ideas for the webinars and topics you'd like to be addressed, and maybe artists that you'd like us to, because I think Jake mentioned it, that we want to have a different guest artist every month join us, just so we have another perspective and it's not just the three of us every time. So we'd love to hear who you guys think might be good, and we'll see what we can do.
Yep, I think this is good. Let's just go to svs.com for the forums. There's a link right there on the forums. If you haven't subscribed, try a subscription, see what you think of the other classes that we're doing. Really sorry we couldn't get to everybody's questions, but I think we'd be here for another hour if we did that. But we'll announce the exact time and date for next week's or next month's webinar. And thanks everybody for coming. All right, we'll see you.
Thanks, guys.